Hi, and welcome to the Mid-Level Exceptional Sport Business Podcast. My name is Joe Easy, and I'm your host. This is our opportunity to talk with exceptional individuals in the sport business and sport industry. Today, I have the opportunity to talk with Havah Smith. Havah is the Director of Learning and Development with the Portland Trailblazers. Thank you so much for spending some time with me here today, Havah.
Hi, Joe. Thanks so much for the invitation.
Absolutely. A lot of my connections and experiences, as you know, been within sales. So I'm so excited to be able to dive into this conversation with you today because your experience, your expertise, your background is very different from a lot of regular listeners may be used to hearing. So, with that being said, let's dive into things here and tell us a little bit more about your story, your background. You're the expert on yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as you mentioned, I've had a winding path to get here. I was thinking about it this morning, and when I went to college, I was thinking I was going to be like an executive in entertainment, like television and film. Like I was a television and film major for a little bit, and I really thought that was going to happen. And then I thought I was going to be an event planner. I was completely sold on that idea. And I left college thinking I was going to be an event planner, which now sounds like a true nightmare to me, actually. And then from that idea, I got an opportunity on the corporate side of the restaurant industry. And that kind of opened up my eyes to what kind of goes on in the background of a lot of industries. And particularly in restaurants, I'm a restaurant fanatic. Like I love them. I love eating out. I love everything about it.
So hang on,
And
what's the difference between being a restaurant fanatic and a foodie?
that's a great question. I'm one of those people who's like foodie is too mainstream and it's overused. So I don't usually call myself a foodie because I think it's just kind of a overused term, but I'm a foodie. And I think now after working in restaurants, I also just appreciate everything about the restaurant beyond like the experience, the service beyond the food. But I think that's true of a lot of foodies.
Okay.
But that's a great question. So I started there as basically a Jill of all trades. I was an executive assistant, office manager, supported HR, supported marketing, and it became very apparent that I was drawn to the training side, is what we called it at that time. And so I joined their learning and development team, which was not a team. It was me and one person that got hired and chose to let me join her on this journey. And I spent, the rest of my time there. I was there for almost 5 years in total, focusing on communication from corporate to our restaurants, making sure that everybody had what they needed to be successful, that they were trained in their job, that they got effective communication when we had new menu items. And that was really where I was like, okay, this is it. I'm originally from Portland, Oregon. I grew up here, and then for college and after college at that restaurant company, I was in Chicago, which I loved, but I always wanted to come back to Portland. So I did. And then this opportunity with the Blazers came up, and I have to be honest, I had never really considered the sports industry. But when I was thinking about it this morning, all these different things that I had in my mind of doing, like film and television and events and restaurants, and okay, here I am at a sports and entertainment venue working with the Trailblazers, working at the Rose Quarter. It's just kind of funny how that happens. But my number one passion is what I do, not so much who I do it for. So my number one passion is around supporting employees to thrive and be successful in their work. And I love doing it at this organization. I'm super committed to the organization because I believe in it. And so I love working in sports and entertainment. But, as you can kind of see, that was never the end goal for me.
Right. And I love how you line that up because so many of the folks that I talk to, whether they're in college or they're trying to get into the industry, they think they need to start in sports to work in sports. And obviously that's not the case for you. That's not the case for so many of the folks that we've worked with. What would you recommend as someone who's changed industries, knowing the limited number of opportunities in sports as somebody who to somebody who is looking to do that at some point in their career.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because I might have a bit of an unpopular opinion on this. This might be my my controversial opinion, and your listeners
Hot
can,
take
of
coming.
course, right, hot take comment. Your listeners can of course, take or leave this advice, but hopefully it will be helpful to just hear something from a different perspective as somebody A who never sought to join the sports industry in particular. Nothing against it, just wasn't seeking it, and somebody B who is in the people and culture realm and is focused on employees, their experience, bringing them in, making them successful. Is I believe for me, and I think a lot of people could take this to heart, that focusing on what you want to do is a big way to find success, even if you are let go a little bit of where you want to do it. And so I'll say this a different way. And this is a concept that Hanif Fazal from the Center for Equity and Inclusion kind of, I first heard from him, and it means a lot. He talked about the idea of attachment versus commitment to an outcome or to a purpose. So attachment is I have to work in the sports industry no matter what. And commitment is I am going to commit to myself to making myself a successful professional in a function or a discipline that is going to be right for me. And I trust that it will take me where I want to go in my career.
However, I don't think that's much of a hot take. I I agree
Well,
with you wholeheartedly on this because I think a lot of people take some time to come around to that approach and philosophy. But I can't tell you the amount of people I've talked to when I was recruiting for entry level roles. And you get into those first couple of conversations, and it's just, I want to work for the Blazers, or I want to work for the NBA, or I want to work in sports. I don't care what kind of job I'll do. And I get you're young and if you're early in your career, you can have that kind of flexibility. But talking to somebody who has a focus on, I want to be in sales because of this, or I want to be in people and culture, I want to be in learning and development, or I want to be in accounting because of this, it strikes you so differently. I mean, look, there's a 20 different career options within the Blazers itself. Like, I was successful for a long time in a sales role. I would not have been in an accounting role. I would not
mm-hmm.
have been in a content creation, social media role.
And I would not be in a sales role,
Right. So
to be honest.
I think being able to separate out, the brand and your excitement for the company from what you really want to do, what's going to excite you every day. Because if you just focus on that logo, if you don't enjoy your job and what you're doing every day, that excitement for the logo burns out very, very quickly because you're spending all day, every
100%.
day doing something.
Yeah, I think I just hear so often this idea of like just get your foot in the door and then you can move around. And I
We
see
could
you
talk.
rolling
I could
your
talk for a
eyes.
long time about how I feel about that foot in the door phrase.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think we're totally preaching the same message here, you
Mhm.
know? I mean, if you really want to work in sports and you're a big sports fan, I love that for you and more power to you. But just getting that foot in the door, it's not going to create fulfillment for you if it's not in the role or the function that is really meant for you. And there are so many transferable skills that people can bring here. As you see, I was not in sports. Lots of people come here from completely different industries. And frankly, on the people and culture side, when we are talking about talent acquisition, it's it is something we think about it when we are hiring, when people are so invested, so attached, that word I just said, to just working for in the sports industry or working for the Blazers specifically, we wonder to ourselves, are they going to be invested in this role? Are they going to be creative in this role? Are they going to be passionate about it? Are they going to be driven? Or would somebody who could take or leave the sports industry, but really cares so much about community development or content marketing, like you mentioned, actually be a better fit? And then, of course, it's great to work for the brand. It's so fun. And, everybody enjoys
Kind
that
of the cherry on
aspect.
top at the end.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly. Yeah.
100%. So to continue to down that path, then, let's say somebody takes your advice and they focus on where their fit is, what their lane is, what they want to do, but they still have their long-term goal is to get into the industry. How would you recommend that person execute that transition
Yeah.
and make that adjustment from I mean, obviously the restaurant industry is not a traditional 9 to 5 either, but how would you recommend somebody make that transition?
Yeah. I think a lot of it depends on what you do, but I think that no matter what your lane is, so to speak, um, developing yourself in that lane, getting creative, and potentially working with different organizations and even in multiple different industries will make you a lot more adept at blending in and understanding a sports organization when you get there. So, for example, I worked for 5 years at the same organization and I learned work that one way. And then when I moved back to Portland before the Trailblazers came knocking, I was a consultant. So then worked with a bunch of they were restaurant companies, but they were different. And they operated totally different. And so it opened my eyes to like, oh, you can do it this way. Oh, you can do it this way. And just having that experience opens your mind to the creativity and makes you so much more adaptable when you enter a new environment. And the other thing I would recommend is continuing to grow yourself in your discipline, in your lane, so to speak, but also just keeping a pulse on what is happening in sport business, if that's something you're really interested in, so you can blend those two fields together. For example, if content marketing is your thing, keeping a pulse on what is happening with content, social media, etc., in the sports industry, so that when that opportunity arises for that interview, you know your lane very well, and then you also are able to make that seamless transition into how it's going to have an impact at that organization you're seeking to work to join.
I think that's great advice. Thank you. So at this point in your career, you've had the opportunity to work in multiple industries, see multiple perspectives. From where you sit today, what does success mean, or what does success look like for you?
To me, success is about seeing impact in the experience of the employees in my organization. So, in learning and development, it's about performance, it's about helping people learn how to do their job, helping leaders understand how to give effective feedback, helping make sure that people have the tools that they need, that they can advocate for themselves. And then also that us as a people and culture team are providing resources that make people feel cared for, really. And so anything that we can do to feel like we are making people feel more confident in the work that they do is what makes me happy and what feels like success for me. So I want people to love working here, and I want to be able to deliver programs that help them feel that way and help them feel like they're really killing it in their role.
Is that a constantly moving target for you? How do you manage that?
100%. I don't know how much that is the reality or if that's just how I operate. I mean, there's always something new to do. And because I was the first person in a dedicated L&D role at this organization, there's so much still to be developed, even though I've been here for this is my fourth season, you know? So the target is constantly moving, and I think that is something I could do a little bit better at is looking back and patting myself on the back for those achievements when I'm always thinking about, okay, what's the next thing? How can we make it better? But I really do like the most valuable thing is hearing from employees say, oh, that workshop you conducted really made an impact for me, or oh, this process is so much better than it used to be. That's success.
Awesome. And I think that that challenge of taking time to celebrate those successes is probably an industry-wide struggle. We have a
We're like, on to the
habit of
next. We're
moving very
busy.
quickly. Yeah. Let's dive in a little bit more to learning and development and training and growth and your real area of expertise in what you do. Especially with an organization like sport and entertainment, where there's so many different lanes, there's so many subject matters, and it's impossible to ever really be a subject matter expert in all things at all times. How do you build or drive training in an area where you may not have that subject matter expertise, but you know it's an important area for growth?
I mean, I'm not a subject matter expert in most things, frankly, that I have to build uh programming around. Leadership and professional development, those are the areas that I feel like I can add the most value from my own expertise, but pretty much everything else I do. And a lot of times in in the area of development and leadership, I'm having to learn constantly. And I think that if you're a L&D professional, you have to be super, super curious. And that's one of the things that makes my job really interesting to me. So what I feel like I'm doing constantly is taking in a ton of information and then figuring out how to work it around in my brain and then deliver it back out in a way that's going to have impact. And I have to stay curious and be really humble that I don't know and really engage with my subject matter experts, build those relationships, ask the questions, always refer to them. And I think that the more you do it, the more you know you don't know, and the better a learner you become. And I love that part of my job.
I love that description because I think, a lot of times you find that the subject matter experts, they're not really necessarily the best at delivering information or teaching. They're just, here's a technical handbook, go and do it.
Exactly.
But that doesn't help someone really pick something up. So being able to have the ability to take in information and break it down from somebody who is an expert in their field,
Mhm.
process it, and then deliver it for somebody who can then absorb it and put it into practice. That is a skill that I don't know how to really quantify or describe, right?
It's complicated, but yeah, it's complicated and it's very intangible. But it is one of the things that I hear from people is one of my superpowers. And so I try to harness it as much as possible because I have learned how I can support people and really make an impact by doing that for them, by taking in that information that is not accessible or not digestible and figuring out how to do that. And that's one of the things that makes me love my job is I can make things accessible to folks that sets them up to learn and grow and succeed.
On that same kind of path, with an organization like the Blazers and the Rose Quarter, and I'd assume you also probably experienced it in the restaurant industry, you got so many different levels of staff, not just different subject matter, but so many different levels of staff. You got full-time, part-time, seasonal, temporary. How do you balance your time and balance your programming and the resources that the company has available to ensure that everybody has opportunity, access, and resources to grow when you know that growth is a priority for the company?
Yeah, Joe, this is my Everest. It's so hard. And it's actually so much harder here than at restaurants because in the restaurant organization I was working at, it was a multi-unit, it was a chain basically. And so every restaurant was doing things mostly the same way. And so it was a lot of employees, but they were doing a few distinct jobs in just a bunch of different locations. Here we have one location, which is nice, but we have people doing a million different jobs. And I mean, amongst our full-time staff, I would say over half of our full-time staff are the only person in their specific role. Right? If you think about it, like on my team, there's two people with the same role, and then there's 8 of us with all different roles. So everything has to be so individualized, and I have a few philosophies around this. One, how do I focus on the things that's going to make the most impact for the most people? So, how do I focus on the things that are going to be most impactful for the organization and help the most folks? So, I have to think big picture a lot, thinking about behavioral competencies that we want everybody to exhibit at the full-time level, or everybody to exhibit at the part-time level, figuring out how we can create performance development plans that are going to be able to be tailored to everybody. And then the other thing that I strive to do, and I think we still have opportunities is supporting leaders, focusing on leader development and supporting leaders with the tools to create these things for their staff as the subject matter experts. And so right now we work in that model where leaders are really responsible for getting their staff up to speed when they start out, and because we just can't take on new hire training for everybody. And I think it's getting better, and we still have a lot of opportunity to support those leaders to continue to be able to develop their skills at doing that.
I just got the notification that we were running low on time for our recording session here. So I'm going to jump to the last question, which is always my favorite one to ask. Havah, you are getting a huge promotion. It is to be president of the sport industry, not just the Trailblazers, not just learning and development in sport, not just people and culture in sport, but the entire sport business and however many billions of dollars that includes. With that, you get a magic wand that allows you to make one change to the industry, and that change happens overnight and immediately. It's not something that you have to build up towards or cycle towards. What change are you making?
This, I don't think it's specific to the sports industry, but it is definitely super applicable. I think every industry needs to do this, and we're getting better at it as a society, but recognizing the value and investing and pouring into our people. And I don't just mean by training them, I mean by providing them support, resources to thrive at home, making sure that managers are skilled in leading so that they have exceptional experiences at work. They feel psychological safety. They have the procedures and the systems set up around them to succeed, so they aren't always wondering what is happening. They aren't working in silos. I think that what we do in people and culture is to support employees, and the more investment we make in that, the greater systems and infrastructure we can put in place to do that. People and culture is not just employee relations or when people make complaints or workers' comp. That's the bare minimum. And the investment to add on to L&D and organizational development, it can have an exponential impact. And so I would just like to see, especially in sports where people are working crazy hours and they're constantly on the go and things are fast paced, the more we pour into our people, the more they will thrive and the more we will thrive as an organization. And so I'm always preaching that investment.
I think that's huge, Havah. And if we could unlock that across the industry, I could only imagine the kinds of impacts that would have, not just on our business, but on the people that are connected to our people. Couldn't think of a much better answer than that one.
Yeah, well, we're working on it.
One step at a time, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Unfortunately, we don't have that magic wand to be able to make that quick change. Well, thank you again, Havah, for spending some time with me here Friday afternoon. We'll be likely posting this here very soon. And I think there's a lot of great takeaways that you are leaving folks with to think about and to be able to apply, whether they are in or looking to be in sports or are already in sports, whether they're in a people and culture field or in a sales field or something else. I think there's a lot that you have left us with that can be applicable to no matter what lane of the industry people are in or trying to get into. So thank you so much for your time.
I'm glad to hear it. Yeah. Focus on your growth and advocate for yourself. I will add, because that advocacy is how we get closer to that magic wand change.
There you go. And to all the listeners out there, thank you so much for spending some time with us, whether it's the morning or the afternoon where you're at. This again has been Mid-Level Exceptional Sport Business Podcast. If you know anybody, if you're connected to anybody who is exceptional at what they do, like Havah is, please send them my way. Thanks again.